I'm a student doctor. My first patient is the reason I might die tonight. I'm a med student. I was just meant to observe, maybe assist. Nothing in our textbooks or training prepares you for this. I'm writing this from my locked bedroom as something he moves around my house like an animal, only quieter, more intentional. Please, someone tell me what to do. I don't know how long the door will hold. It started 3 weeks ago. I'd only just begun my first rotation, internal medicine. I was shadowing my supervising doctor at St. Thomas's. He was sharp, old school, always wore a bow tie and never seemed rattled. I looked up to him, still do. The man didn't blink during a code blue, but he'd always said, "It's the quiet ones you watch closely, not the screamers. The ones who smile when they shouldn't." I didn't get it at the time. My first solo case, just a basic consult, but my supervising doctor let me take the lead, was a man listed as patient 46B, mid-30s, slight build. No emergency, no urgent flags, just unexplained bruising. He sat calmly in the consult room, no obvious injuries. Pale, thin lips, brown hair that hung limp like it had given up. But his eyes, that was the first thing. They were gray, not blue-gray or hazel gray, just gray, unsettlingly blank, like a fogged-over mirror. He spoke slowly, politely, his voice low and toneless. Said the bruises started appearing 3 months ago. Inner thighs, upper arms, spine, places you'd expect with abuse or a bleeding disorder. I examined him, and yes, there were bruises, but they were wrong. The edges weren't purple or yellowing like healing ones. They were pitch black, with a red core, as if something inside was trying to get out. I remember asking if he was on any blood thinners. He said no. I asked about substance use, alcohol, anticoagulants. "Never touched a drop," he replied with a smile that felt like someone else's mouth wearing his face. I was unsettled, but I had to write something down, so I chalked it up as possible immune thrombocytopenia, gave him a mild corticosteroid prescription, and told him to return in a week. "We'll run more tests," I said. "Probably nothing to worry about." I regret those words. When he returned a week later, things escalated. He looked thinner. Same dark clothes, same blank expression, but there were more bruises. His neck now, around his jawline, and several across his scalp like blotches of ink. He didn't sit this time. He stood in the corner of the consult room, facing the wall, like he was in timeout. "Lucas?" I asked. That was the only name he'd given. "You okay?" "I can hear them now," he whispered. "In the walls. They want out, but they like you." I glanced at the mirror, wondering if this was some elaborate psych eval trick. But it was just me, alone, with him. He finally turned. His pupils were dilated, almost consuming the irises, and there was blood under his fingernails. "I don't scratch," he said, as if reading my mind. "They move around inside me. I'm not doing it." I referred him to our liaison psychiatrist. I also requested a follow-up with internal. Something didn't add up, physically or mentally. "We'll get you seen again soon," I told him. "Just hang in there, okay?" He nodded. "You should lock your doors more, especially after dark. You're warm. They'd like to wear you." The next day, I visited the psychiatrist's office to check in on the referral. The secretary looked up, confused at first. Then her expression shifted, something quieter, tinged with sadness. "He hasn't come in. You haven't heard?" "Heard what?" She hesitated. "He was found dead, last night, bludgeoned, in his office. Police think it happened after hours. We're closed today for..." I was already walking away, ears buzzing. I didn't want to believe it was connected. Couldn't be. But I felt it in my gut. I called the station, asked to speak with the detective in charge. I got bounced around until someone finally took me semi-seriously. "Yes," the voice on the other end said. "We're looking for a patient. Mid-30s, gave the name Lucas, used a fake address on the intake form, no ID. We're advising all staff at St. Thomas's to stay alert and avoid contact. The detective lowered his voice. We've found things. In Dr. P's office. Blood in places it shouldn't be. Symbols carved into the carpet beneath his chair. And something under his fingernails. Not human. That was 12 hours ago. I've been trying to act normal since. I finished my shift early, told the nurse I had a migraine, took the tram home, looking over my shoulder the whole time. And now this. I came home and the house was dark. I live alone in a single-level terrace. Usually it feels cozy. Not tonight. I locked the door, flicked the hallway light on. He was there, not standing, on the ceiling, pressed against it like a spider. Barefoot, clothes torn. Skin too pale, almost translucent now. The bruises had overtaken his limbs, crawling up his face in broken, inky veins. But it was his expression that paralyzed me. A smile so wide it stretched unnaturally, as if his cheeks were tearing from the force of it. His eyes. They were solid black now. Not just the irises. All of them. Like two obsidian marbles reflecting my horror back at me. He didn't speak. He just moved. Not like a person. His limbs twisted at angles no joint should allow, slow and jerky like a puppet handled by someone who's never seen one before. He crept across the ceiling toward me. I wanted to scream, but couldn't. My throat locked up. I stumbled backward, hands shaking, keys falling to the floor. He dropped, no sound, just thud, right in front of the door, blocking it. Standing there now, head tilted, arms hanging limp, still smiling. I ran, bolted up the stairs, locked myself in the bedroom. I've barricaded it with a chair and a shelf. I don't know if it'll matter. He hasn't spoken once, but he's knocking now. Not on the door, on the walls. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then knocking from the other side of the room. I swear to God I heard him giggling. I called the police. They said they'd dispatch someone, but there's been a surge of emergencies. Said it'll take 30 minutes minimum. I tried to explain that a patient might have killed a psychiatrist and is now in my house. They said, "Try to stay calm, sir. Maybe step outside." I can't. He's everywhere. The lights keep flickering. My phone battery's at 9%. I can hear him moving in the ceiling above me now. Sometimes dragging something. Sometimes whispering. My name. Over and over. Doctor. There's a scratching coming from inside the closet. I didn't check it. I didn't think to. Wait. Oh God. The closet door just creaked open. It's pitch black in there, but I can see something moving. Long limbs. That smile. He was never downstairs. He's been in here the whole time. Please, someone tell me what to do. I'm posting this in case I don't make it. The cops are 20 minutes away now. My bedroom door just creaked. Update. Noises have stopped. No knocking, no whispering. Just silence. I think he's waiting. If you read this, please share it. And if a patient with gray eyes, blood under his nails, and bruises that don't heal ever walks into your clinic, run. Before we get into the next story, please subscribe. It really helps me grow. The Enfield Poltergeist, 1977, England. In 1977, the Hodgson family, living in a modest council house in Enfield, England, began experiencing disturbing supernatural occurrences. It started with strange knocking sounds, but soon furniture moved on its own. Objects flew across the room, and the children, especially 11-year-old Janet, seemed to be the focus of the activity. Janet was reportedly thrown from her bed, levitated in midair, and even spoke in a deep, guttural voice that was later analyzed by paranormal experts. Neighbors, police officers, and reporters all witnessed bizarre events in the house. One officer even signed a statement confirming she saw a chair move across the floor without anyone touching it. The case was investigated by Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair, members of the Society for Psychical Research. They documented over 2,000 incidents of paranormal activity. However, skeptics believe that Janet and her siblings faked at least some of the events. The Enfield case remains one of the most well-documented and debated poltergeist hauntings in history. It even inspired The Conjuring 2. 2. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959, Russia. In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers set off on a trekking expedition in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. They never returned. Weeks later, searchers found their campsite in a disturbing state. Their tent had been cut open from the inside, and the hikers' bodies were scattered across the snowy landscape. Some partially buried in the snow, others miles away from the campsite. The victims were found in various states. Some had crushed skulls and broken ribs, yet no external wounds. One was missing her tongue and eyes. Strangely, some were dressed in only underwear despite the freezing temperatures, while others had pieces of clothing that showed traces of radiation. Investigators were baffled. Theories ranged from an avalanche, which didn't match the evidence, to secret military experiments, yet no definitive explanation has ever been found. The Soviet government quickly closed the case, stating the hikers died due to an unknown compelling force. To this day, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most chilling and unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. 3. The Murder of Elisa Lam, 2013, USA. In 2013, 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam checked into the infamous Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, a place known for housing serial killers, suicides, and mysterious deaths. A few days later, she went missing. The last known footage of her, taken from an elevator security camera, was deeply unsettling. The video showed her acting strangely, stepping in and out of the elevator, pressing multiple buttons, peeking out as if hiding from someone, and making erratic hand gestures. Weeks later, after hotel guests complained about low water pressure and strange-tasting water, maintenance workers checked the rooftop water tanks. Inside one of the tanks, they discovered Elisa's decomposing body. The rooftop was locked, the tanks were difficult to access, and the circumstances of her death baffled investigators. The official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning, but many believe there was more to the story. Some suspect foul play, while others think she may have experienced a psychotic episode. The case remains unsolved, fueling countless theories about paranormal involvement, hotel history, and mental health. The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel, 1976, Germany. Anneliese Michel was a young German woman who, in the early 1970s, began experiencing terrifying symptoms. Voices in her head, hallucinations, and violent reactions to religious symbols. Raised in a strict Catholic household, her family believed she was possessed by demons rather than suffering from a medical condition. Doctors diagnosed her with epilepsy and schizophrenia, but medication didn't help. Her behavior worsened. She ate insects, drank her own urine, and spoke in multiple voices. She also displayed supernatural strength, often throwing family members across the room. Her parents turned to the Catholic Church for help, and after initial hesitation, 2 priests were assigned to perform an exorcism. Over 10 months, they conducted 67 exorcism sessions, some lasting up to 4 hours. During these rituals, Anneliese claimed to be possessed by multiple entities, including Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, and even Adolf Hitler. By July 1976, after months of extreme fasting and grueling exorcisms, Anneliese died from malnutrition and dehydration. She weighed just 30 kilograms, 66 pounds, at the time of her death. Her parents and the 2 priests were charged with negligent homicide and sentenced to 6 months in prison. The case sparked worldwide debate about the dangers of religious extremism and the fine line between mental illness and possession. To this day, the recordings of her exorcism remain some of the most terrifying evidence of alleged demonic possession. 5. The Villisca Axe Murders, 1912, USA. On the night of June 9, 1912, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, an unknown intruder entered the home of Josiah and Sarah Moore and brutally murdered 8 people, including 6 children. The attack was savage. The killer used an axe to crush the victims' skulls while they slept. The bodies of the Moore family and their 2 young house guests were discovered the next morning by a neighbor. Investigators found eerie details. The murderer stayed in the house for hours. Cigarette butts were found in the attic, suggesting he had been hiding there before striking. All the mirrors were covered. The killer draped cloths over the mirrors and reflective surfaces, a strange behavior that some interpret as ritualistic. No valuables were taken. This wasn't a robbery, it was a targeted attack. The axe was left behind. The killer wiped it clean and placed it next to the bodies. Despite several suspects, including a traveling minister who confessed but later retracted his statement, no one was ever convicted. The case remains one of America's most infamous unsolved murders. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House is a paranormal hotspot, with visitors reporting eerie whispers, unexplained shadows, and the sensation of being watched. Some claim to hear children's voices crying in the night,